Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab. Now, let's begin. Nathan Vincent knelt beside his workbench, running his calloused hand along the smooth edge of the dining table he'd been refinishing for the past 3 weeks. The workshop behind his house smelled of sawdust and varnish, a scent that had become as familiar to him as his own daughter's shampoo. He checked his watch. 4:30. Carmen would be dropping Elisa off at Joan's house right about now. He'd been building custom furniture for 12 years, ever since he'd walked away from his father's construction company. His old man had wanted him to take over the business, but Nathan had seen how those long commercial projects had hollowed his father out, turning him into a stranger who came home too tired to remember his kids' names. When Elisa was born, Nathan made a choice. He'd work for himself, set his own hours, and never miss a moment of his daughter's life. The cell phone buzzed on the cluttered workbench. Carmen's name lit up the screen. "Hey," Nathan answered, tucking the phone against his shoulder as he wiped his hands on his jeans. "I just dropped her off." Carmen's voice carried that tight edge it always had when discussing her mother. "Mom's already commenting about Elisa's weight." Nathan's jaw clenched. "What'd she say?" "Something about holiday cookies and how we're not watching what she eats." Carmen sighed. "I told her to drop it, but you know how she gets." He did know. Joan Acevedo had opinions about everything: how they raised Elisa, where they lived, why Nathan worked with his hands instead of getting a real career. She'd never forgiven Carmen for marrying a carpenter instead of the lawyer she'd tried to set her up with back in college. "It's just until Friday," Carmen said. "Mom wanted time with her after Christmas, and we did promise." "I know." Nathan pressed his thumb against the bridge of his nose. "I'll pick her up Friday afternoon." "You working late?" "Conference call with the West Coast office. Probably until 7. Carmen worked in pharmaceutical sales, a job that kept her traveling 3 weeks out of every month. It was another thing Joan criticized: a mother should be home with her child, as if it were still 1955. After they hung up, Nathan tried to return to his work, but his concentration had fractured. Something about leaving Elisa with Joan always set his teeth on edge. The woman was cold, critical, and seemed to take pleasure in pointing out flaws. She'd raised Carmen in a house where love came with conditions and approval had to be earned. Carmen had spent years in therapy unpacking that damage. But Joan was still family, still Elisa's grandmother. And Carmen felt obligated to maintain the relationship, hoping that maybe Joan would be different with her granddaughter than she'd been as a mother. Nathan had his doubts. The next morning, Nathan drove out to the Carmichael property on the edge of town. The family wanted a custom pergola for their back patio, and Nathan had promised to take measurements and show them some design sketches. The January air bit through his jacket as he surveyed the backyard, jotting notes on his tablet. "Mr. Vincent?" He turned to find Margaret Carmichael coming down the back steps, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She was a retired school teacher, somewhere in her 60s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Thought you might need this," she said, handing him a mug. "Freezing out here." "Appreciate it." Nathan took a grateful sip. "I'm thinking we could extend the pergola another 4 feet to the east. Give you more shade in the afternoons." They discussed details for a few minutes before Margaret's expression shifted, growing more serious. "How's your little one?" "Elisa, right?" "She's good. Staying with her grandmother this week." "Joan Acevedo?" Margaret's eyebrows rose. "Over on Whitmore Street. You know her?" Margaret's mouth formed a thin line. "I taught her daughter, your wife, back in 3rd grade. And I had Joan as a parent volunteer for exactly 1 semester before I had to ask her not to return." Nathan set down his coffee mug. "What happened?" "She made comments to some of the children." Margaret chose her words carefully. "About their weight, their clothes, their capabilities. One little boy went home crying because Joan told him he was too stupid to understand fractions. The parents complained, and rightfully so." She paused. "I probably shouldn't have said anything, but when you mentioned your daughter was staying there." "No, I'm glad you did." Nathan's chest had tightened. "Carmen doesn't know about that. It was 25 years ago. I'd hoped she'd mellowed." Margaret shook her head. "But people like that, they don't usually change. They just get better at hiding it." Nathan finished the consultation on autopilot, his mind churning through implications he didn't want to face. Carmen had shared stories about her childhood. The cutting remarks, the impossible standards, the way affection was withheld as punishment. But Joan had seemed better lately, or at least less openly hostile. They thought maybe time had softened her edges. He sat in his truck outside the Carmichael house for 10 minutes, phone in hand, debating whether to call Carmen. But what would he say? Margaret's story was old, and he had no proof Joan was mistreating Elisa now. It would only start a fight, create tension. Carmen didn't need while she was trying to close a major deal at work. Nathan started the engine and headed home, telling himself he was overreacting. 3 more days. He could wait 3 more days. Thursday afternoon brought an unexpected commission. Blake Ashley, who owned the largest restaurant in town, called about custom booths for his new location. Nathan had done work for Blake before the man paid well and on time, 2 qualities Nathan valued in a client. They met at the construction site, a gutted building on Main Street that smelled of fresh drywall and paint. Blake was explaining his vision for an upscale casual atmosphere when Nathan's phone rang. Joan's number. "Excuse me," Nathan said, stepping away. "Nathan Vincent." "It's Joan." Her voice was clipped, formal. "Elisa had an accident. She spilled juice on my carpet." Nathan waited for more, but Joan seemed to expect a response to this earth-shattering news. "Okay. Is she hurt?" "The carpet is silk, custom imported. Do you have any idea how much that costs?" "I'll pay for the cleaning, Joan. It's not a big deal." "It is a big deal when your child has no discipline, no self-control. She's becoming unmanageable." Nathan's free hand curled into a fist. "She's 7 years old. Kids spill things because her parents let her do whatever she wants. This permissive parenting style." "Joan, I'm in the middle of a work meeting. We'll talk about this when I pick her up tomorrow. You'll talk to your daughter about respecting other people's property. Goodbye, Joan." Nathan hung up, jaw aching from how hard he'd been clenching it. Blake was examining paint samples, tactfully pretending he hadn't overheard. "Sorry about that," Nathan said. "No worries." "Mother-in-law? How'd you guess?" Blake laughed. Recognized that particular brand of frustration. "My ex-wife's mother was a piece of work." He set down the paint samples. "Look, I've got to run to another meeting. But I want you to know I've seen your work at the Henderson's Place and the community center. You're talented, man. Professional. Don't let family drama make you doubt that." Nathan nodded, though Blake's words barely registered. His mind was stuck on Joan's voice, the barely contained anger over a spilled drink. He remembered Margaret Carmichael's story, the way Joan had made children cry. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. Friday morning, Nathan woke before dawn, too restless to sleep. He made coffee, reviewed sketches for the Ashley restaurant job, and checked his phone every 10 minutes like a teenager waiting for a text. Carmen had flown to San Francisco on Tuesday and wouldn't be back until Sunday. He promised to pick up Elisa at 2 o'clock. At noon, his phone rang. An unknown local number. "Mr. Vincent, this is Christine McGill. I'm a nurse at Mercy General Hospital." Nathan's heart stopped. "Is it my daughter?" "No. No, sorry to scare you. Your mother-in-law, Joan Acevedo, listed you as an emergency contact. She came into the ER this morning with chest pains. We're running tests, but we need to keep her for observation. She mentioned her granddaughter is at the house. I'm on my way." Nathan was already grabbing his keys. "Is Joan okay?" "Stable. Likely anxiety-related, but we're being cautious given her age and blood pressure." Nathan made the 20-minute drive to Joan's house in 14 minutes. The ranch-style home sat on 2 acres of immaculately maintained property. Joan's late husband had been a dentist, and she'd inherited enough money to live comfortably without ever working. She spent her days in garden clubs and volunteer organizations, where she could exercise her particular talent for judgment. He knocked on the front door. No answer. He tried the handle unlocked and stepped inside. "Elisa? Sweetheart, it's Dad." The house was quiet, eerily so. Nathan moved through the formal living room with its plastic-covered furniture and into the kitchen. Dishes in the sink, a smell of burned something lingering in the air. His unease grew. "Elisa?" A small sound from upstairs, barely audible. Nathan took the stairs 2 at a time. The guest bedroom door was closed. He opened it to find Elisa sitting on the bed, knees pulled to her chest, eyes red from crying. She wore an oversized t-shirt and sweatpants, her hair unwashed and tangled. "Hey, baby girl." Nathan crossed the room and knelt beside the bed. "I'm here." "We're going home." Elisa looked at him, and something in her eyes made his blood run cold. Fear. She was afraid, and not just startled or upset, genuinely afraid. "Come here." He opened his arms, and she fell into them, wrapping her small arms around his neck so tightly he could barely breathe. She was shaking. "What happened?" Nathan kept his voice gentle, though fury was building in his chest like a pressure system. "Did Grandma do something?" Elisa pulled back, and that's when Nathan saw them. Bruises on her upper arms, purple and yellow, the unmistakable shape of finger marks. Adult-sized finger marks. She said. Elisa's voice was barely a whisper. She said, "I'm too fat. She made me wear something all day yesterday. To teach me a lesson." "Wear what?" Elisa slid off the bed and went to the closet. She pulled out a black trash bag. Nathan's vision tunneled. The room seemed to shrink and expand at the same time. He took the trash bag from his daughter's hands, saw the crude holes cut for head and arms, and something fundamental broke inside him. "She made you wear this?" Elisa nodded. "All day. She said I looked like garbage and should dress like garbage until I lost weight." She lifted her shirt, and Nathan saw red welts across her lower back and sides, the distinctive marks of a belt. "She hit me when I cried," she said. "I was being dramatic." Nathan pulled his daughter close again, kissing the top of her head, his mind racing through rage and calculation. Christine McGill had said Joan was stable, that her chest pains were likely anxiety-related. Good. That meant she wasn't dying. Because Nathan needed her alive for what was coming next. "Pack your stuff," he said softly. "We're leaving. And Elisa, you're perfect exactly as you are. Grandma is wrong. About everything." While Elisa gathered her belongings, Nathan walked through Joan's house with new eyes. He photographed the trash bag, the belt hanging in Joan's closet, the dishes piled in the sink. He opened the refrigerator and found it nearly empty, some diet drinks, wilted lettuce, expired yogurt. Had Joan been feeding Elisa properly all week? In Joan's bedroom, Nathan found her journal on the nightstand. He shouldn't read it, he knew that. But his daughter had bruises shaped like fingerprints, and all his moral boundaries had just been redrawn. He flipped through the pages. Joan's handwriting was precise, controlled, marching across the pages in neat rows. Most entries detailed gardening club meetings and grocery lists. But the entry from yesterday stopped him cold. "The child is completely undisciplined. Carmen has ruined her with this modern permissive nonsense. I told Elisa she's getting fat, she needed to hear the truth. When she cried, I made her wear appropriate attire to reflect how she's treating her body. She tried to remove it, so I had to use the belt. Just as I did with Carmen. Spare the rod, spoil the child. She'll thank me when she's older and not obese like the Pierce girl down the street." Nathan took photos of the journal entry with hands that shook from the effort of staying controlled. He wanted to destroy this house, tear it apart brick by brick. Instead, he carefully returned the journal to its place and went to collect his daughter. Elisa emerged from the guest room with her small suitcase, wearing her favorite purple hoodie. Nathan took her hand. "Dad?" She looked up at him. "Are you mad at me?" "No, sweetheart. I'm mad at Grandma. But not at you. Never at you." They walked out of Joan's house together. Nathan locked the door behind them, pocketing the key Joan had given them years ago. Then, he loaded Elisa's suitcase into his truck, buckled her carefully into her booster seat, and drove away from that house. But he wasn't done. Not even close. First, he needed to make sure Elisa was okay. Then he needed to call Carmen. And after that, Nathan Vincent was going to teach his mother-in-law about consequences. The hospital could keep Joan comfortable for another day or two. She'd need that rest. Because when she came home, her whole world was going to burn. Nathan took Elisa to Dr. Jerry Beard, their family physician. Jerry had delivered Elisa 7 years ago, and had watched her grow through regular checkups and the occasional strep throat. He was a thoughtful man in his 50s, soft-spoken but direct when necessary. Jerry examined Elisa with gentle efficiency, documenting the bruises on her arms, the belt marks on her torso. He measured and photographed each injury, his expression growing increasingly grim. "These are going to be sore for a while," Jerry said to Elisa, offering her a lollipop from his desk drawer. "But they'll heal. You're a tough kid." Elisa managed a small smile and went to the waiting area to play with the toys Jerry kept for young patients. Jerry closed the exam room door and turned to Nathan. I'm mandated to report this, Jerry said. You know that. I know. I want you to. Good. Jerry pulled out his phone. Because I'm calling Child Protective Services right now, and then I'm calling the police. Your mother-in-law committed assault and child abuse. This isn't ambiguous. Nathan nodded, his jaw tight. Part of him had wanted to handle this himself, to keep it private, to protect Carmen from the fallout. But Elisa deserved better than private family solutions to public crimes. There's something else, Nathan said, pulling out his phone. He showed Jerry the photos of the journal entry, the trash bag, the nearly empty refrigerator. She wasn't feeding her properly either. Elisa says she only got salad and diet bars all week. Jerry's expression darkened. Jesus. Okay, this is worse than I thought. How's Carmen handling this? I haven't told her yet. She's in San Francisco for work. You need to call her. Now. Before CPS or the police do. Nathan stepped into the hallway and dialed Carmen's number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. He sent a text. Call me as soon as possible. About Elisa. She's okay, but we need to talk. While Jerry made his calls, Nathan sat with Elisa in the waiting room. She was arranging plastic dinosaurs in careful rows, her concentration absolute. She'd always been a methodical child, thoughtful and observant. Nathan's heart ached watching her try to create order in her small world. Dad? Elisa didn't look up from the dinosaurs. Is Grandma going to be mad? Grandma doesn't get to be mad anymore, Nathan said firmly. What she did was wrong. Very wrong. And adults who hurt kids face consequences. What kind of consequences? The serious kind. Detective Luther Higgins arrived 40 minutes later. He was a broad-shouldered man in his early 40s, with tired eyes that had seen too much. He introduced himself, shook Nathan's hand, and then knelt down to Elisa's level. Hi there, Luther said gently. I'm a police officer. I heard you had a pretty rough week. Think you could tell me about it? Elisa looked at Nathan. He nodded encouragement. She began to talk, her small voice recounting the horror of the past days, Joan's cruel comments about her appearance, the forced wearing of the trash bag, the belt strikes when she cried, the minimal food. Luther recorded everything, his expression never changing, though Nathan saw his hands grip his notepad tighter with each detail. After Elisa finished, Luther stood and gestured for Nathan to step aside. I'm putting out a warrant for Joan Acevedo's arrest, Luther said quietly. We'll pick her up as soon as she's discharged from the hospital. This is textbook, child abuse, injury to a child, assault, unlawful restraint. We're looking at multiple felony charges. Good, Nathan said. In the meantime, keep documenting everything. If Elisa remembers more details, write them down. And Mr. Vincent? Luther's eyes hardened. I've been doing this job for 18 years. I've seen what grandparents do to kids when they think they're helping or disciplining. Your mother-in-law is going to face the full weight of the law. I'm going to make sure of it. Carmen finally called as Nathan was driving Elisa home. He pulled over to take the call, not wanting to have this conversation while driving. Nathan, what's going on? Your text scared me. He told her everything. The phone call from the hospital, finding Elisa in Joan's house, the bruises, the trash bag, the journal entry. Carmen made small sounds of distress, then went silent. Carmen, you there? I'm here. Her voice was hollow. I'm booking the next flight home. I'll be there by midnight. We're filing charges. The police are issuing a warrant. Good. The single word carried decades of pain. I should have known. I should have, her voice cracked. She did the same things to me. Not as bad, but similar. I thought she'd changed. I thought maybe with Elisa she'd be different. This isn't your fault. I left our daughter with a woman who abused me. How is that not my fault? Nathan didn't have an answer for that. They talked for another 10 minutes, Carmen alternating between grief and rage, before she had to go catch her flight. Nathan sat in his truck, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. The legal system would prosecute Joan. She'd face charges, maybe even jail time. But that wasn't enough. Not for Nathan. Joan had hurt his daughter, had hurt her deliberately, methodically, documented it in her journal, like she was proud of it. The law would punish Joan, but Nathan was going to make her understand. Saturday morning, Nathan made Elisa pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, her favorite. She ate quietly, pushing food around her plate, not meeting his eyes. The bruises on her arms had darkened overnight, purple and black flowers blooming across her skin. "You don't have to eat it all," Nathan said. "There's no rules like that here. You eat what you want." Elisa looked up at him, relief washing across her face. "Grandma said I had to finish everything or I wouldn't get dinner." Grandma was wrong. About everything. Carmen's flight had been delayed, and she'd landed at 3 in the morning. Nathan had picked her up from the airport, and she'd gone straight to Elisa's room, spending an hour sitting on the edge of the bed, watching their daughter sleep. When she'd finally come downstairs, Carmen looked hollowed out, aged 10 years in a single night. Now she sat at the kitchen table, coffee untouched, staring at her phone. "CPS is coming this afternoon to do a home visit. Standard protocol when there's been abuse. We've got nothing to hide. I know. But they're also investigating whether we should have known, whether we failed to protect her." Carmen's voice was flat, emotionless. "Which we did. I knew what my mother was like, and I left Elisa with her anyway." "Carmen. Don't." She held up a hand. "Don't tell me it's not my fault. I've spent my whole life making excuses for her, thinking she'd get better, hoping she'd change. And now my daughter has belt marks on her back." Nathan wanted to argue, to reassure her, but Carmen was right. They'd both seen the warning signs and ignored them. The critical comments, the rigid rules, the way Joan's affection was always conditional. They'd hoped it wouldn't escalate, that Elisa would somehow be different. The CPS visit went smoothly. Susie Mead, the caseworker, was professional and thorough. She interviewed Nathan and Carmen separately, then spoke with Elisa in her room. Afterward, she assured them that no one was questioning their parenting, the issue was solely with Joan. "The police arrested her this morning," Susie told them. "She's being held pending arraignment. Given the photographic evidence and her own journal entry, the DA is confident about prosecution." After Susie left, Nathan found himself in his workshop, trying to lose himself in work. But he couldn't focus. His hands moved through familiar motions, sanding, measuring, checking joints while his mind spun through darker calculations. Joan was in jail. Good. She'd face trial, likely be convicted, maybe serve time. The legal system would grind forward with its usual bureaucratic precision. But Nathan kept thinking about the trash bag. About Elisa's face when she'd pulled it from the closet, the shame and fear in her eyes. About the journal entry, Joan's cold satisfaction in her discipline. He pulled up information about Joan's arraignment on his phone. Monday morning, 9 o'clock. She'd likely make bail. The charges were serious. But she had no record, owned property, wasn't considered a flight risk. She'd be back in her house by Monday afternoon. Nathan set down his sandpaper and stared at the unfinished table before him. He'd built custom furniture for 12 years. He knew materials, structures, how things fit together and came apart. He understood leverage and weight distribution, stress points and breaking points. And he was starting to form an idea. Sunday evening, Carmen put Elisa to bed early. Their daughter had been quiet all day, jumping at sudden sounds, asking repeatedly if she had to go back to Grandma's house. Carmen had held her, promised her she'd never have to see Joan again, that she was safe. But Nathan knew better. Safe was relative. Joan would make bail. She'd hire a good lawyer. Maybe she'd get probation, maybe house arrest, maybe even a suspended sentence if she played the elderly grandmother card well enough. The system wasn't designed for justice, it was designed for procedure. He found Carmen in the living room, staring at a photo album. Pictures of their wedding, of Elisa as a baby, of family gatherings. Joan appeared in several photos, smiling tightly, always positioned slightly apart from everyone else. "I want to testify," Carmen said without looking up. "When this goes to trial, I want to tell the jury what she did to me growing up." "You sure? Your lawyer will advise against it." "I don't care." Carmen finally met his eyes. She needs to know she didn't just hurt Elisa. She's been hurting people her whole life, and someone needs to say it out loud. Nathan sat beside her, taking her hand. "Jerry said the belt marks should fade in 2 weeks. The bruises maybe sooner. And the emotional damage?" Carmen's voice broke. "When does that fade? I'm 34 years old, and I'm still unpacking what she did to me. Elisa's 7. Elisa's stronger than you think. And she's got us." Carmen leaned against him, and they sat in silence. The weight of the past week pressing down on them. Outside, The winter wind rattled the windows. Inside, Nathan's mind continued its methodical work, building a plan piece by piece. Monday morning, he drove to the courthouse for Joan's arraignment. He sat in the back of the courtroom, watching his mother-in-law appear in an orange jumpsuit, her face pinched and angry. The judge set bail at $50,000. Joan's lawyer, some expensive suit from a downtown firm, argued for reduction, citing her age, her community ties, her lack of criminal history. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Kendra Barnett, presented the photographic evidence. The judge's expression darkened as images of Elisa's bruises flashed on the courtroom screens. Bail stood at $50,000. Joan made bail by 2 o'clock. Nathan watched her walk out of the courthouse with her lawyer, her posture rigid with barely suppressed fury. She climbed into a black Mercedes, her lawyer's car, and drove away. Nathan followed at a distance. They went to Joan's house. The lawyer stayed for 20 minutes, probably reviewing conditions of bail, no contact with minors, surrender of passport, weekly check-ins. Then he left, and Joan was alone. Nathan parked 3 houses down and watched. Lights came on inside. Joan moved past windows, a shadow among shadows. He thought about Elisa asking if she was going to have to go back. Thought about the trash bag, the belt, the journal entry. Thought about Carmen's question. When does the emotional damage fade? The legal system would do what it could. But Nathan was done waiting for justice to arrive on someone else's timeline. He started his truck and drove home, a plan crystallizing in his mind. Tuesday afternoon, Nathan met with Blake Ashley at the new restaurant site. Blake wanted to adjust the booth design, add more storage underneath. They discussed specifications for 40 minutes before Blake's phone rang. He stepped away to take the call, leaving Nathan alone in the empty dining room. Nathan pulled out his own phone and searched for information about Joan's house. Property records, utility setups, the original blueprints from when it was built in 1982. Everything was publicly available if you knew where to look. The house had a basement. Joan never used it, she was getting older, and stairs were difficult, but it was there, accessible through a door off the kitchen. The blueprints showed it was unfinished, just concrete and exposed beams, probably used for storage. Blake returned, apologizing for the interruption, and they finalized the booth design. As Nathan was packing up, Blake said, "Hey, I heard about your mother-in-law. The arrest." News traveled fast in a small town. "Yeah. I'm sorry, man. That's rough. How's your daughter?" "She's okay. Healing." Blake nodded. "My cousin had something similar happen with her ex-husband's mother. The woman was poisoning their kid's food, not enough to kill her, just enough to make her sick so she could play hero by nursing her back to health. Munchausen by proxy. They called it twisted stuff." "What happened?" "She went to prison. But it took years. Multiple trials. The system moves slow." Blake's expression hardened. "Sometimes I think people like that deserve more than prison. They deserve to know what it's like to be powerless, to be hurt by someone who's supposed to protect you." Nathan met his eyes. "Yeah, sometimes I think that too." They shook hands and parted ways. Nathan drove home, Blake's words echoing in his head. Joan would face trial, but trial was months away. In the meantime, she was free to live in her comfortable house, sleep in her comfortable bed, convinced that she'd done nothing wrong. That night, after Elisa was asleep, Nathan went down to his workshop. He pulled out the blueprints of Joan's house that he'd printed earlier. He studied the basement layout, the dimensions, the access points. Carmen appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing?" "Planning." "Planning what?" Nathan looked at his wife. "The trial's going to take months, maybe a year. Joan's lawyer will drag it out, file motions, push for delays. Meanwhile, she's out on bail, telling anyone who'll listen that she's the victim here, that we're overreacting." "I know." Carmen's voice was tight. "I saw her Facebook post. She's playing the persecuted grandmother, saying she was only trying to help Elisa with her weight problem. I want her to understand, really understand what she did." Carmen stepped into the workshop, closing the door behind her. "What do you mean?" Nathan hesitated. What he was considering was illegal, dangerous, probably insane. But he kept seeing Elisa's face, the fear in her eyes when he'd found her in that bedroom. "I'm going to her house," Nathan said slowly. "I'm going to trap her the way she trapped Elisa. Make her experience what she put our daughter through." Carmen was silent for a long moment. "When?" Friday night. She has a garden club meeting until 9. I checked her calendar, she always goes. You'll need help. Carmen. She's my mother. My responsibility. If you're doing this, I'm coming with you. Nathan started to argue, then stopped. Carmen's expression was steel. This wasn't about revenge for her, it was about protecting their daughter, about finally standing up to a woman who'd controlled and damaged her for decades. Okay, Nathan said. But we do this carefully. We document everything. And when we're done, we call the police. Deal. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Nathan made discreet visits to hardware stores in neighboring towns, buying supplies with cash. A motion sensor camera, cable ties, a few other items. Nothing overtly suspicious on its own, but together they formed a toolkit for something the law wouldn't approve of. He also called Jerry Beard, asking a hypothetical question about how long someone could safely be restrained before risking serious injury. Jerry had been curious but didn't press. Nathan kept it vague, academic. Jerry gave him medical information about circulation, pressure points, time limits. Carmen, meanwhile, worked her own channels. She called Joan's neighbor, Maggie McCarty, under the pretense of checking on her mother. Maggie happily reported that Joan seemed fine, was going to garden club as usual on Friday. Carmen thanked her and hung up, sharing a loaded glance with Nathan. Everything was falling into place. Friday night arrived cold and clear. Nathan drove past Joan's house at 8:15 and confirmed her car was gone. He parked 3 blocks away, in the lot of a defunct grocery store. Carmen sat beside him, dressed in black, her face pale but determined. Last chance to back out, Nathan said. Not backing out. They walked to Joan's house through a wooded path that ran behind the properties. Nathan had scouted the route earlier, no cameras, no streetlights, minimal risk of being seen. They reached Joan's back door at 8:30. Nathan pulled out the key Joan had given them years ago. It still worked. They slipped inside, closing the door quietly behind them. The house was dark, silent. Nathan moved through it with the confidence of someone who'd memorized the layout. Carmen followed, her breathing quick and shallow. They went down to the basement. It was exactly as the blueprints showed: unfinished concrete, exposed beams, boxes of old belongings stacked against the walls. Nathan had been right. Joan never came down here. The stairs were steep and narrow, difficult for someone in their 60s. They set to work. Nathan installed the motion sensor camera in a corner, angled to capture the entire basement. He tested it twice, checking the wireless feed on his phone. Perfect. Next, he prepared the space. A single metal folding chair in the center of the room. Cable ties attached to the chair legs and support beam behind it. On the workbench against the wall, Nathan placed the trash bag, the same one Joan had forced Elisa to wear, and beside it, Joan's belt, retrieved earlier from her closet. The final touch, a small cooler containing only the items Joan had fed Elisa during her stay. Wilted lettuce, diet bars, diet drinks. Minimal, inadequate, intentionally humiliating. Carmen stood at the top of the basement stairs, keeping watch. Nathan checked his phone. 8:55. Joan would be home soon. They heard the car pulling into the garage at 9 to 10. Nathan and Carmen moved quickly, positioning themselves on either side of the door to the garage. Joan entered through the kitchen, humming something tuneless, flipping on lights. She set her purse on the counter. "Hello, Joan," Nathan said from behind her. She spun, eyes wide. "What are you? You can't be here." "I have a restraining order." "No, you don't," Carmen said, stepping into view. "You have bail conditions that say you can't contact Elisa." "We're not Elisa." Joan's face flushed with anger. "Get out of my house, or I'm calling the police." "Go ahead." Nathan gestured to her phone. "But first, let's have a conversation about what you did to my daughter." "I disciplined her. That's what grandparents do when parents fail. You forced her to wear a trash bag. You beat her with a belt. You starved her." "I did not starve. She's overweight. She needed to learn." Carmen moved fast, grabbing her mother's arm. Joan tried to pull away, but Nathan was already there, his carpenter's hands strong and sure. Together, they guided Joan toward the basement door. "What are you doing? Let me go. You're going to experience what you put Elisa through," Nathan said calmly. "Just for a few hours. Then we're calling the police, and you're going to tell them everything. And if you don't, the camera down there will." They brought her down the basement stairs, Joan fighting and cursing the entire way. Nathan secured her to the chair with the cable ties. Tight enough to restrain, but not tight enough to cut off circulation. He'd researched this carefully. Joan screamed threats and obscenities, her face twisted with rage. Carmen picked up the trash bag. Put this on. I will not. You made a 7-year-old child wear this. All day. Put it on, or we leave you here until Monday. Joan's eyes darted between them, finally understanding that they weren't bluffing. Slowly, humiliatingly, she pulled the trash bag over her head, her arms through the crude holes. Nathan set the cooler beside the chair. This is what you fed Elisa all week. If you get hungry, that's what you have. And Joan? He leaned close. The camera is recording everything, every moment of this. When we leave, you'll be alone, in the dark, unable to move. Just like Elisa felt. You can't do this, Joan whispered. We can, Carmen said. Because someone needs to teach you what powerlessness feels like. They walked up the stairs. Nathan paused at the top, hand on the light switch. We'll be back in 4 hours. That's how long Elisa wore the bag on her first day. Before you decided she needed more discipline. 4 hours, Joan. Think about what you did. He flipped the switch. The basement went dark except for the small red light of the camera. Joan's screams followed them up the stairs. Through the kitchen, out the back door. They walked back to Nathan's truck in silence. Once inside, Carmen started crying harsh, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. Nathan held her, saying nothing, because there was nothing to say. What they'd done was illegal. Kidnapping, unlawful restraint, assault. If Joan pressed charges, they'd go to prison. But Nathan didn't care. Elisa had worn that trash bag for hours. Had felt the bite of that belt. Had gone to bed hungry in a stranger's house, afraid and alone. Now Joan knew what that felt like. They waited exactly 4 hours, parked in the defunct grocery store lot. Neither of them spoke much. Carmen checked on Elisa via the nanny cam in her room. Their daughter was sleeping peacefully, watched over by Carmen's cousin who'd agreed to babysit without asking too many questions. At 1:15 in the morning, they returned to Joan's house. The camera feed showed Joan slumped in the chair, the trash bag still over her head, her face blotchy and swollen from crying. She'd stopped screaming around midnight. Nathan and Carmen went down to the basement. Joan's head jerked up when she heard footsteps. Please, she whispered. Please let me go. Nathan cut the cable ties. Joan's hands were red and sore, but not damaged. He'd been careful about that. Carmen removed the trash bag. Joan looked at them with something Nathan had never seen in her eyes before. Fear. We're calling the police now, Nathan said. You're going to tell them you violated your bail conditions by contacting Carmen. You're going to tell them about the journal, about what you did to Elisa, and you're going to accept whatever sentence they give you. No appeals. No fighting it. And if I don't? Nathan held up his phone, showing the camera feed. Then this video goes public. Your garden club, your church, your lawyer. Everyone you know, they'll all see you in that trash bag, crying and begging. They'll see exactly what kind of person you are. Joan's face crumbled. You wouldn't. Try me. Carmen knelt beside her mother's chair. You abused me, my entire childhood. I forgave you because I wanted to believe you'd changed. But you didn't. You just found a new victim. My daughter. And that I will never forgive. Carmen, I was trying to help. No. You were hurting her because it made you feel powerful. Just like you hurt me. Carmen stood. The police will be here in 10 minutes. If I were you, I'd think very carefully about what you're going to tell them. They called Detective Luther Higgins from Joan's kitchen. Nathan explained that Joan had violated bail conditions, had threatened them, had forced their hand. Luther arrived with 2 patrol officers, and they took Joan into custody. As she was being let out in handcuffs, Joan turned to Nathan. You're going to prison for this. Maybe, Nathan said, but so are you. The truth came out more slowly than Nathan expected. Joan, true to her nature, tried to press charges for kidnapping and assault. But when the prosecutor reviewed the camera footage which Nathan provided voluntarily and saw Joan in the trash bag, saw her screaming the same thing she'd said to Elisa, the charges were quietly dropped. Kendra Barnett, the prosecutor, met with Nathan and Carmen privately. What you did was illegal, she said bluntly. No question. But Joan's lawyer has advised her not to pursue it. They've seen the video. They know how it would play to a jury. So she's just getting away with everything? Carmen's voice was sharp. No. She's pleading guilty to 3 counts of injury to a child, assault, and unlawful restraint. 5 years in state prison. No possibility of early release. Kendra's expression softened. The judge saw the video too. Off the record, he told me he wished he could sentence her to 10. 5 years. Nathan did the math. Joan was 62. She'd be 67 when she got out, an old woman, marked forever as a child abuser. Elisa would be 12. Nearly a teenager. Safe. It would have to be enough. The trial came and went with surprising speed. Joan's guilty plea eliminated the need for testimony, which meant Elisa didn't have to face her grandmother in court. Jerry Beard submitted his medical report. The photographs spoke for themselves. The judge handed down the sentence with barely concealed disgust. Carmen and Nathan sat in the courtroom, holding hands as Joan was led away. She didn't look at them, didn't look at anyone. Just shuffled out in her orange jumpsuit, smaller somehow than she'd been. Afterward, outside the courthouse, Carmen said, "I thought I'd feel better after she was sentenced. But you don't? I feel empty. Like I've been carrying this weight for so long that now that it's gone, I don't know what to do." Nathan pulled her close. "You heal. We all heal." 3 months later, Nathan finished the custom booze for Blake Ashley's restaurant. The grand opening was a success, packed house. Rave reviews. Blake grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. He found Nathan near the bar and shook his hand firmly. "This is amazing work, man. Exactly what I envisioned. Glad you're happy with it." Blake lowered his voice. "I heard about your mother-in-law. The sentence. News travels. It does. And people are talking about what you did. Some think you went too far." Blake's eyes glinted. "Personally, I think you showed incredible restraint. 4 hours. I'd have left her for 4 days." Nathan didn't respond to that. He'd made his peace with what he'd done, but he wasn't proud of it. Wasn't ashamed either. It simply was a moment of rage channeled into action. Consequences be damned. At home, Elisa was thriving. She'd started seeing a therapist, a kind woman named Rhonda Elliott who specialized in childhood trauma. The bruises had faded. The belt marks were gone. But the real healing was internal. Invisible, measured in small victories. Elisa laughed more now. She ate without asking permission. She didn't flinch at sudden movements. One evening, Nathan found her in the living room, working on a drawing. She'd been in an art phase lately, filling sketchbooks with elaborate scenes of dinosaurs and castles. "What are you making?" he asked. "A picture of our family." She held it up. 3 figures, Nathan, Carmen, and Elisa standing in front of a house. Notably absent, any 4th figure. "Looks perfect," Nathan said. "It is perfect, because we're safe." Nathan kissed the top of her head, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "Yeah, baby girl, we're safe." Joan served her 5 years without incident. She was a model prisoner, quiet, compliant, participating in every rehabilitation program offered. When she was released, she moved to a different state, somewhere far from her former life. Carmen heard through distant relatives that Joan had gotten a job at a library, lived in a small apartment, kept to herself. No one from the old garden club or church had stayed in touch. Her friends, such as they were, had abandoned her when the truth came out. Nathan didn't follow Joan's post-prison life. As far as he was concerned, she'd ceased to exist the moment the judge's gavel fell. She was a ghost, a cautionary tale, a problem solved. Elisa, now 12, had grown into a confident, thoughtful young woman. She played soccer, excelled in school, had a tight group of friends who came over on weekends to watch movies and eat pizza. She told her therapist that she barely remembered what happened at her grandmother's house, the mind's merciful way of protecting itself from trauma. But sometimes late at night, Nathan would see her standing in her doorway, checking that he and Carmen were still downstairs, still there, still protecting her. The wariness never fully left. Trauma didn't work that way. On the 5-year anniversary of Joan's sentencing, Carmen and Nathan took Elisa on a trip to the coast. They spent a week at a beach house, doing nothing but swimming, reading, and watching the sunset. On the last night, they had a bonfire on the beach. Elisa poked the fire with a stick, watching sparks spiral into the dark sky. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Anything," Carmen said. Why did Grandma hate me? Carmen was quiet for a long moment. Nathan reached for her hand, offering silent support. She didn't hate you, Carmen finally said. She hated herself. And people who hate themselves sometimes hurt the people around them to feel better. It's not an excuse. It's just an explanation. Did she hurt you too? Yes. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, sweetheart. It's not your fault. Carmen pulled Elisa close. The important thing is that you're safe now. We made sure of that. Elisa leaned against her mother, and they sat like that for a while, three silhouettes against the firelight, bound together by shared survival. Nathan stared into the flames, thinking about the night in Joan's basement, the sound of her screaming, the way justice had finally imperfectly, messily been served. What he'd done still kept him awake some nights. The moral ambiguity, the violence of it, the way he'd become someone capable of that darkness. But then he'd look at Elisa, thriving and whole, and the guilt would recede. Because whatever darkness he'd embraced, however far he'd gone, it had been in service of protecting his daughter. And he'd do it again in a heartbeat. The fire crackled. Waves crashed against the shore. Somewhere far away, in a small apartment in a forgettable town, Joan Acevedo lived with the consequences of her actions. And here, on this beach, her victims built something new from the ashes she'd left behind. It wasn't a perfect ending. There were scars, visible and invisible, that would never fully fade. But it was their ending, hard-won and honestly earned. Nathan tossed another log on the fire and watched it catch, flames consuming the wood and transforming it into light. Justice, he'd learned, was sometimes its own kind of destruction. And sometimes, that was exactly what the world needed. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.